I like to match the way I feel about practicing to the actual seasons. Summer, fall, winter, spring. So in the summer seasons of my practicing, I will do things like give myself a boot camp week. That entire week, either I'm only working on a single piece, everything that I practice is surrounding that piece, or sometimes I want to master a certain skill. For example, like I haven't done whistle tones in a while, so the next time I have one of these kinds of boot camps for myself, I want to dedicate like at least a few days to just perfecting whistle tones again. Another good project would be to play around with flutter tonguing. These summer seasons of practicing are sort of my gung-ho times where I'm like really into it. I'm really excited to pick up the flute. I'm really excited to work on the stuff I'm working on. I tend to go crazy with it. So I can spend an hour on like one thing. My personal limit is around 3 hours. I can do that and I don't feel tired. I mean, I'll feel sore, but it's that kind of like nice kind of sore when you've had a good workout. The adrenaline is pumping. You feel really good about what you've done. You feel satisfaction. You feel productive. It's very good for your self-esteem. Like it feels great. For a long time, I felt like that kind of practicing was how you knew you had a good practice session. Any practice session that didn't feel like that was bad. I don't know why I think this way. I guess it's just that feel-good feeling. Having that feel-good feeling made me feel like I had a good practice session. But then things start to slow down a bit. That's the season that I would call like fall or autumn. Usually around this time is when things start getting busy. School gets busy, work gets busy. Maybe I have to do a lot of editing. Maybe there's lots of gigs. You're still playing your instrument, but you either don't have the time to have those really good, feel-good practice sessions, or you don't have the energy. You know, if you've been running around doing stuff, if you've been working all day on something, you do run out of energy to practice in the same enthusiasm as you did in the previous season. That's when I would say that, at least for me, you start to feel like you're struggling because you're like, trying to hold on to those amazing practice sessions that you had. You're chasing those feelings of having had a good practice session, despite not having time for it and or despite not having the energy for it. I end up pushing myself to try to match the amount of time that I put in my summer season of practicing. That burns me out. I'm learning now to recognize when I don't have the time and I don't have the energy to not push myself that hard. To be more okay with like doing what I call maintenance practicing. For me, that would include like some harmonics, a little bit of tone, some Machiavellian exercises, maybe a piece of repertoire or an etude that I'm working on. But to not go too ham on like learning new things. The idea is to kind of have some sort of routine that you can fall back on that doesn't require that much time and that much energy. That's something that I wish that I had developed earlier, which is why I'm sharing it with you guys. This idea that you don't always have to be getting better when you're practicing. At the very least, you should maintain what you're doing. A lot of times what happens is that if you don't have the time or the energy to get better, at least for me, I would just kind of give up and just not practice entirely, which would make me get a little worse, actually. So for me, it was either I get better or I get worse. There was no like sit in the middle maintaining until I have the time and the energy to get better. And what I'm realizing is that you need to have some sort of fallback routine that doesn't take a lot of time and it doesn't take a lot of energy that will allow you to maintain your current state of playing and hold you over until you have your summer season again. The winter season of my practicing is typically when I am feeling burnt out. There's a number of reasons why one would feel burnt out, and it doesn't necessarily only have to do with the flute itself. Something maybe has happened in your family, something has happened in your work, something has happened in your relationships. Anything that happens in your life, I feel, does affect you in your flute playing. If something has happened to you and you find that you really don't have the energy to pick up the flute and even do maintenance practicing, there's a few things that I find really helps. One is to actually sit down and give yourself the permission to have a little vacation from the flute. What ends up happening usually is that, you don't have the energy, you don't have the time, plus you're burnt out from whatever it is that's happening in your life. You take one look at the case of the instrument and you're just like, I cannot. And you end up procrastinating with something else. You don't end up practicing, and then you feel guilty at the end of the day. And then the next day, rinse and repeat. You take a look at the case. You really don't want to take it out, even though you feel like you should. You go and do something else instead. The end of the day comes. You feel guilty again. And it just is basically sort of like a snowballing of guilt. And I feel like if you're going to procrastinate anyway, and if you're not going to play the flute anyway, that, by the way, while all of this is happening, you still love the instrument. You just don't want to play it. I feel like, one, there's obviously stuff happening in your life right now. I don't actually think you should feel shame for not wanting to play your instrument when you have those huge things happening in your life. Two, because I don't think you should feel shame for not wanting to practice, then I also think that you should not feel guilt for not practicing. I feel that the only way to not give yourself shame and guilt for not practicing is to just give yourself time off. It's like putting in your vacation days to your manager, except you are your own manager. For some people, it can just be a week. For some people, it needs to be like a few months. Now there's no more shame and there's no more guilt involved. After you've come to the end of your vacation, at that point, I don't really feel like it's very productive to jump right back into practicing. You're just picking up the instrument again. In the winter season, it's really important to get to the bottom of why you love the instrument and why you want to practice it. So the first question of why you love the instrument can be answered by just simply playing around with tunes and with repertoire that you like. This can be old repertoire that you've studied before that you just like. This can be figuring out movie soundtracks, video game soundtracks, anything your heart desires. Whatever it is that you love listening to, play that on the flute. And don't care about the tone, don't care about the articulation, technique, or anything like that. Like, at this point, it's important to fall in love with your instrument again. Basically, what we're doing is we're stripping down all of the work and only having the play. Learning an instrument and learning your craft, it's a balance of work and play. And if you jump right back into only the work aspect, you can get burnt out really easily again. That has happened to me before, which is why I am telling you guys. You'll basically just put yourself back into the burnt out phase again, and you'll have to take another vacation. I've seen that cycle happen a lot. You should actually give yourself a pat on the back, even if you've only been playing for 5 minutes and you decide to put the flute away, but you played something that you liked. Those good feelings start to come back a little bit. Don't give yourself a deadline for how long you're just playing around on the flute. You want to feel like you have the time and the space to just enjoy the instrument. After a while, you'll get to what I have called the spring season. You start to notice some things about how you're playing when you're just playing around. Things like, oh, like my tone could be a bit better here, or I could use a different tone color here. And then you'll find yourself kind of looking for exercises and looking for books to help you. And you'll actually find yourself practicing a bit without making yourself practice. It's more like you want that part to get better. So you're like, okay, let me just kind of like work on this a little bit on the side and then come back to what I'm playing around with. That's where I feel like you're starting to like bloom again. This sort of practicing is a little bit unstructured though, because it really is just dependent on what you're playing around with. After you find yourself doing this for a few weeks, that's when I think you can start looking into what you really want to practice, looking into a routine again, and then you will find yourself moving into the summer season of practicing again. It really is like seasons. I would say that for me, it's more dependent on life events. If I'm in a season of my life where nothing is really happening, things are actually kind of boring, then I will actually practice more. But once things start getting busy, or if like huge life events happen, whether they're good or bad, I will tend to kind of like go into my fall season of practicing. And then if something really bad happens to me, that's when I go into my winter season. Once that big bad thing has passed, then I will kind of move into the spring season, and then it'll move back into the summer season when things are boring again. I think it is important for you guys also to kind of take a look at how you react to life events, how you react to the weather. You'll see a pattern arising. I personally have felt that knowing my own history of practicing and knowing this cycle of how I practice has been really, really helpful. I'm a lot more positive about practicing, even if I don't have time or the energy for it. Like, I know what's coming up next and I know how to deal with it now. I have a lot less shame and a lot less guilt now when I don't have time to play and practice, because I know how to maintain it and I know how to feel good about what I'm doing, even if I don't have a lot of energy for it. As I am filming this, it is the beginning of January, the beginning of 2019. I know a lot of you guys have New Year's resolutions. You guys are thinking about, like how you're going to practice this year and stuff like that. Because, like, let's face it, if you're watching this channel, you are wanting to practice an instrument of some sort. I wanted to make this video to help you guys see a more realistic view of what your practicing may actually look like this year. It's kind of like the gym at this time of year. The gym at this time of year is just absolutely filled with people. And then by the end of January, a lot of people have already fallen off the bandwagon. I don't want you guys to end up doing that, but on an instrument. I wanted to make this video just really from the bottom of my heart to help you guys. Every one of you watching this video can do it, but just be realistic about it. If you go into your winter season of practicing this year, I just want you to know that you do not need to feel shame or guilt about it. You can come out of it just like the rest of us do. You're not alone. I know that we tend to feel very alone because a lot of times we're just practicing by ourselves in our own little rooms and practice rooms, and you feel like you're the only one going through what you're going through, but you're not. We've all been through it. This is just me talking about my experience with it. I hope you guys have a wonderful 2019. I hope that the beginning of your year is going swell. Let me know in the comments below what you did over the holiday break and what your New Year's resolutions are. If you like this video, make sure to give me a big thumbs up, hit subscribe for new videos every Saturday. Hit the bell icon to get notifications. However, YouTube has been really, really broken, so even the notifications aren't even going through. So just come back every Saturday. I'll be here. If you want to follow me on my social media, they're listed down below. My last video is playing right here, which I will put a link to up here for you guys. You can hang out with me on Patreon about every other week, but otherwise, I'll see you guys next week. Bye. I decided to not be lazy and actually set up my microphone, so that's why the sound is a lot better today.